Hello there, folks. Happy Thanksgiving. This is the day after Thanksgiving. I hope y'all had a really good Thanksgiving. As you can see, we got some relatively abnormal weather for this time of year. And it looks like that's going to continue for a bit, another week at least. Um, but wanted to talk today just about a little bit of soybean weather to watch. We got a world wheat situation I want to go over, just kind of what to expect out of that market, as well as a little bit on the war side. So yeah, let's get started. Before, you got to admire this piece of equipment we got here. I believe, let's see, get me out of the way first. The sun's wrong. I think we're talking 1955 or 1957, somewhere in there. This thing was made. It's a TD6, and I've got, this on the other side of it. This arena I've got here was all about 8 to 10 foot big sagebrush. And I ended up bulldozing that thing. It was all big sage. And it did all that work. It did all of the prep work around our house. The thing just starts right up. I just find it funny because, anyway, the thing's almost 70 years old and still running. So I'm sure you guys have some stuff like that laying around the place too. It's just kind of funny. I depend on something that's that age for my landscaping projects. But anyway, yeah, getting started. So on the war side, we've got Zelensky's saying he wants a truce and will basically give Russia everything they've gained so far in the war if the rest of Ukraine can be NATO. So that was one of the big sticker points off the bat, was that Russia was not going to allow Ukraine to be NATO. So, we'll see what Russia says. A lot of people think Russia's losing the war, depending on which spin you're listening to. You can find both spins out there really easily, and really hard to tell what's true. But if Russia is in a weak position, via numbers or equipment or whatever, with the ruble collapsing, that does give them an out, but then they've got NATO right at their doorstep, which has said they'd never let happen. So I'd say that's very unlikely to take place, but they're working at it. So anyway, some of that ceasefire trade we had last Friday, that was part of it. You had a lot of people getting out of the way before deliveries. That was part of last Friday's plunge, which kind of ruined the technical picture of the wheat market, at least from what I'm watching. So anyway, we'll see what happens. And then you've got some more developments, which I do not understand. You've got Russia bombing Syria, portions of Syria, and making Turkey upset. And Turkey they were the ones who came up with the grain corridor. They were the ones, or something they did. They were the ones who canceled all their imports for this year because wheat stocks were going to be tight. I mean, Turkey's hurt us a couple of times, and now they're squabbling with Russia, which is odd because I think they've got a lot of their wheat from the Black Sea this year, just in a different fashion than normal. So we'll see how that plays out too. That's an interesting thing, because if talk of another grain corridor happens and Russia's not getting along with Turkey, then Russia's apt to say, no, we don't care about your grain corridor. So who knows? Let's I guess deeper into the weeds than I care to know. I just try to figure out what's gonna move our grain markets and go from there. But it's too easy to get out in the deep water and have no idea. So as for the soybean market, massive sales today. Geez, almost 1 million metric tons in a snap sale. That's really large. You don't see that very often. But yeah, on a Friday after Thanksgiving to boot. So that was impressive. Their sales was for the week were 2.5 million metric tons, was also impressive. So that market, it doesn't look very good yet. It's too cheap, but it's or too cheap to want to sell anything, but it's maybe it could have a little life here. And looking ahead, we got some weather. We've got the it's the northern half of the Brazilian corn and soybean belt could go very dry here in the 6 to 10 days, six day out. So we'll see what the weather maps do with it. If that continues, you have to see some premium built into this soybean market pretty quickly, which is good because I felt behind in sales on that. I've got a long way to go to get my soybean position to where I want it to be. And I mean, I'm basing it off the historical highs, which are usually made in that, you know, April, May, June, July frame. But I think we're still dealing with higher highs in harvest than we are now. So, you know, we need a higher market to engage that that historical backing. So if that makes any sense at all, I'm basing that on when I did that 21-year history of when the highs are made. So we need to eclipse that September high in order to avoid the oh, sorry, I think dogs are attacking my wife on a motorcycle, four-wheeler or something down there. Anyway, moving on to world wheat. So it's southern hemisphere harvest right now. It sounds like there's a great deal of rain coming into Australia. We'll see how much of the wheat belt it actually hits. Their harvest is a little higher than we were looking at earlier. I was at 28.5 to 29. USDA was at 32. I think realistically it's probably going to be more closer to 30, maybe even 31. Now, does USDA raise theirs from 32 to 33 because of better yields? I don't know, probably. They might add 1 million tons there. Argentina is still looking at 17.5, 18 flat, which is right where I was at. Right where USDA is a little higher than that. So, not a big deal there. And it sounds like France, which had all the problems early, they are looking at a 7% acreage drop so far this year, and this is almost December. I'd think they'd be done. So anyway, so what does this market do going forward? And the part that I'm struggling with is here we are, a couple bucks below the cost of production. Everybody just losing ground left and right. No way to forward contract, no opportunities that I can even see. And yet, when I look at the balance sheet, we're looking at, you know, we've been 800 million metric tons on demand for 5 years. And once we make it to May, they're going to throw that in there again. I'm going to guess this year, I think we're at 803 last. I bet we're going to be 810, 812 by the time this year's done. Russia, at least based by the Sovicon guy, continues to say that their pace is faster than last year and their stocks are well below last year. So they're down 26% from last year, 25, 26% across the board. And so they're going to tighten up dramatically. Their ag minister came out today and said their export pace should be 10 to 11 million metric tons for the rest of this year between now and June 30th, which is not very much wheat. They've been doing about 4 million metric tons a month. And if they drop to 11, you know, from Dece to July, I mean, you're looking at, you know, what, 1 1/3, 1.5 million metric tons a month. So they're going to disappear from the playing field real fast. That's going to leave some in Eastern Europe. Definitely going to be some in Eastern Europe, the U.S., and I think the Southern Hemisphere, they may dominate the scene for another month or two, but their exports are jumping up fast. So, I mean, they're going to export to their normal channels. So, bottom line, the only country with any wheat left at the end of this marketing year is going to be the U.S., and we'll see what that number actually is. I still think we're going to, you know, USDA's export number's too high for Russia. They're still at 48 or 9. Realistically, that's going to be 43, 44. So those 5, 6 got to go somewhere else. We're the only ones that have that amount of wheat. So, that I think is significant, but we're not going to realize that till we get into, you know, Jan, Feb, March, something like that. Which means our market is probably not going to go anywhere in the short term unless we get some sort of event that gets it excited. And the way it's handled the war so far, it just doesn't seem to matter. And even though there's been calls for ceasefires and some chatter along those lines, we certainly have not seen that on the ground. Russia launched a massive amount of strikes Thursday, our Thanksgiving. They really let loose and bombed a whole bunch. Kind of fascinating to see what the damage is when they're done. But then, where was I going to go with that? But I guess what to plan on it from your seat. You know, don't plan on anything good here for a bit. I think we got a little more time to go. And then, as we get into mid-January there, it's only 45 days away, let's see what this export pace is. If we continue to grind out the numbers we've been grinding out, we're going to have to see USDA bumping up the export estimates pretty quickly, because, you know, I think to be on pace, we need around 250,000 tons a week. And today we were, what, 350, 360? And that was the lowest of the 4-week average. So we're certainly cranking out the bushels. That's what heals all of our problems. So anyway, I'll email if something happens. I guess overall the whole summary of the wheat point was, what doesn't make sense to me is if we're going to have an 800 million metric ton 5-year average carryout, either our demand ledger has completely changed, and what used to be a 1.5 to 1.2% growth every year is now gone. That doesn't exist anymore, and that doesn't make sense, especially given the price and the population growth and the changes in diets, which support using more grains, not less. The more protein they get, the more grains we use. So what doesn't make sense to me is to sit here at $2 below the cost of production, and then we run into this next year where if it's year 6, I mean, we're going to be, you know, for 810 this year on demand, 815, next year's going to be banging on 830, if not 840. And here comes another crop that's sub 800. It's going to take good crop across the globe to hit 800 or 805. And maybe we hit 805, but it sure doesn't seem possible with Russia's start the way it went. Unless they just have an open, warm, wet winter, which just doesn't seem likely. So that northern half of their wheat belt is just not in good shape, and that's going to matter. Their inputs are off. Their farmers are losing money. They're backing off. Their acreage is down. EU acreage is down. US acreage is down. So, like, at some point, this market has to move. It can't waddle all the way through this next winter and spring at $2 below the cost of production and then realize, oh, look, we're short by 30 or 40 million metric tons, and then off we go to the races. That just doesn't make sense to me. So, you know, what's a fair price? Well, personally, I felt like this year, you know, speaking in white wheat terms, we should probably be around 7 to 7.5, at least covering most of a producer's costs and not punishing them. And you say, well, the dollar's high. Yeah, the dollar's high. It's not that high. We were a lot higher in 1998 through 2005. We were significantly higher than where we are now. But we had lots of wheat back then too. So not only now we're acting like we have lots of wheat and the dollar's back up at that 120 level that, you know, we're not even close to. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But like I say, I'll just kind of put the tea leaves together to figure out the trajectory we're going to go. And see, technically it looks like a disaster short term. It looks like we're probably stuck here another month Hopefully not, but hopefully we just run out of sellers. But in today's computer world, I don't think that in the old days we'd run out of sellers and the market was done going down. Nowadays, I don't think that exists. I don't think we can run out of sellers. Sellers just trigger more selling. And the computer programs continue to trigger more selling. And the chart breaks down, that triggers more selling. So there's no bounce. No bounce at all. But so as far as my wheat position, probably should have sold another 10%, but I guess I'm at the point now where I'm like, well, I'm convinced enough in the long term of this thing, unless our global diets have significantly canceled wheat, that I'm willing to see what happens into Jan Feb before I do anything else. You know, especially if the export pace maintains, because that's what matters in the long run. And you know, at some point the world's going to wake up and understand that demand is not going to equal our production every year at a flat pace, you know, indefinitely like it has the last 5 or 6 years, so they say. So hope that makes sense. It's always hard on these videos to make sense, but anyway, we'll let you go. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.